Welcome back to Partnerships Unraveled, the podcast where we unravel the mysteries of partnerships and channel on a weekly basis. My name is Rick van der Bos and I'm the CEO and founder at Channext, and I'm here together with Alex Whitford, VP Partners at Channext. Alex, how are you doing today?
Yeah, really good. Excited to be here.
Agreed. The sun is shining outside and it's going to be a good day, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. A perfect January day.
Especially with the topic we're going to discuss today. I think one of the most talked about topics in channel and in partnerships, especially in a lot of the conversations that we are having as well, deal registration. And maybe what is deal registration and why do we have it within the channel?
Sure. So deal registration is a practice where partners are able to effectively notify the vendor and the distributor of an opportunity. And what that typically does, there's lots of benefits aligned, maybe preferential pricing or secured stock, but that allows them to say, hey, this is an opportunity I'm actively working on. And the idea is that then there's a pretty scientific conversion ratio at a sort of vendor level between number of deal regs, the value of the deal reg, and then the conversion rate. So it's a predictor, a sort of leading indicator to revenue performance.
Yeah, so for the vendor, we could probably say that's to get a lot more insight into your pipeline and to forecast a lot better. And what's in it for the partner?
Yeah, so the partner, there's a few different benefits that you see pretty sort of traditionally across sort of the big channel vendors. One of those is typically a preferential price. So very often what will happen is a partner will go to an end user, they'll position a product, and then they'll notify the vendor to say, hey, I'm working on this opportunity. But that end user will probably then go and ask 2 or 3 other partners for a price. And so what the first notification does is typically you'll get then a price advantage against your competitors because you've generated that opportunity. Another benefit might be that you get extra rebate based around the number of deal regs that you've done that quarter, or you may get vendor assisted sales support. So typically what will happen if if the vendor has a large end user sales team, a high touch team, they are only allowed to come in on an opportunity once a deal reg has been created. And some of those teams are brilliant and partners love to have them through the sales cycle, because the partner might be selling a full sort of ecosystem solution. So to have a specialist come in just to talk about one of the key products, that's really helpful through that sales cycle.
Yeah, I think then you really get into a co-selling motion where indeed the end user team of the vendor comes in as well and then really brings the total proposition forward together.
Yeah, if you think about it strategically, you obviously want to hire a brilliantly talented sales team who are phenomenal at closing end user opportunities. That's what they do all the time, and they're an asset for the partner to bring in. And so what you're using your channel and your partners as a filtration mechanism so that those salespeople are being brought in at exactly the right time to help drive opportunities. And those high touch guys have some of the highest closure rates of any salesperson globally, because they're just being brought in at sort of key decision points, makes their job very effective, where they're able to just come in, close the deal. Partner handles all the complexity around like pricing and installation and shipping, all that complicated stuff. And they're just there to talk, how do we get this deal done product wise?
And just to clarify, is the preference pricing only for the partners who registered the deal as the first partner?
Yeah, typically there is one usual caveat, which is if there's like a bid. So very often what will happen if you're a public sector organization, so say, I don't know, the Dutch government wants to buy, a new technology. As part of that public sector framework, there typically is no bid pricing allocated because, frankly, the partner hasn't generated that deal 9 times out of 10. In fact, the vendor's probably working with the government to build a full tender response. And at that case, all of the applicable parties will all get the same price. But yes, realistically, good sort of deal registration design is you want the partners that are generating deals to be protected, because if they do a load of work to generate a deal and then another partner just undercuts them and they haven't done any work and they just think, well, we don't mind not making much money because we haven't done any work for it, that's going to disincentivize your channel and break your channel. So deal registration and sort of program design is so critical to get your partners into that self-sustaining flow, which is ultimately the goal of any channel organization, is that your partners are pretty self-sustainable and they're bringing you lots of business.
Yes, and I think it's also really to make sure that you prevent channel conflict, Because I think that's one of the large things we see, of course, especially in SaaS, where there's also very large direct sales teams. And there your partners will get really pissed off, like if they have worked on that deal indeed, and then not even a different partner, because that can always happen in the free market, but the direct sales team closes that deal, then you will really piss them off.
Yeah, and I've seen relationships break down because of exactly that. And sometimes nothing untoward happened. It was actually just bad communication. And then just relationships have deteriorated. Because if a partner's been working on a deal for 6 months and they are unaware that, let's say, the vendor has also been working on that deal and maybe a deal registration didn't get placed in time or whatever, and suddenly they feel like, hang on a second, I've done the work, and now the vendor, because they don't have to cut a price to the partner, is just able to undercut me. That will just spoil your channel, right? So really good sort of cleansing and process or cleanliness of your deal registration process is critical for success.
I agree. I think we were touching upon it while we were preparing for this podcast. Is it allowed, once a partner registers a deal, that you can say you can work on this deal solely?
Yeah, well, the optimum design, right, if we just think holistically around what you would like the optimum functioning of a channel, is you would love to have thousands of partners who are able to sell your solution just as well as you are, and that you don't have to get involved. That would be what I would describe as a lean channel. That's the goal, basically, of any channel design. And so there is no need for any sales support from the vendor side if your enablement is bulletproof. And for some vendors, they do get there, right? And maybe not with every partner, certainly, but with key partners and sometimes the sort of gold status partners, they are fully self-sufficient and able to close those deals. And in fact, they have, they might have a Cisco specialist if you're a Cisco Gold partner. And that person has been working with Cisco for 20 years, knows all the products, knows how to spec it, knows how to close it, and they're self-sufficient. And in that instance, yeah, deal reg and go and close it independently. Certainly a lot of the business that I've done through my career has been almost fully independent, and we were able to close lots of end user deals with no interaction from the vendor whatsoever.
And could you also say between partners that you say only this partner can work on it, or is that not allowed?
So that's one of the key differences between the US and the EU, and it's one of the things that very often when I do consultancy work, I have to break down for newer vendors that are suddenly entering the sort of European market. Because in the US, you are able to say, right, no, this partner has been working on this deal. We will only give pricing to that partner. That's illegal in the EU. That's not open fair trade policy. So in the EU, the way we get around that is with preferential pricing. The ideal is that if a partner created the deal, they've been working on it, they've done all the work, you give them a supported pricing mechanism so that another partner is not able to undercut them. They'd have to sell at 1% margin or at a loss, and feasibly that just becomes impossible.
Yeah, I think that's the hard thing indeed. Like if you it makes sense. I think even that was the way deal registration started. Like, hey, someone registers a deal and only they can work on it. But then very quickly we found out that legally that's not allowed here in the European Union.
No, exactly. And certainly what you want to do is because also there is the benefit is actually also to the vendor. So one of the things that has happened in the past is when you go, oh, only this partner is allowed to work on this deal, suddenly the partner decides, oh, I'm going to make 50% margin, right? Because if you've got no one to compete against, they can keep their margins really high, means the end user starts to feel that the vendor's product is very expensive. And so what preferential pricing does is it mitigates that to a degree. Because if, let's say, you give one partner 10% supported pricing, which is not uncommon in sort of deal reg terms, what that means is, well, the partner gets 10%, so they're going to make a decent amount of margin, but they can't start charging 50% margin because another partner would still then be able to undercut them. So it sort of keeps the partners honest against each other, but gives the protection for the partner that generated the deal.
Yeah, I think when you're explaining it like that, it makes a lot of sense that it's not allowed because the free market is limited then.
Yeah, exactly. And you don't want that. You want a level of competition between your partners because it keeps them aggressive, keeps them on their toes, keeps them hunting, which is great. But then you don't want it so competitive that actually the partners start to look at a different product because they say, actually, this is just, it's not worth our time anymore. There's, margins are 1% to 2%. We're not going to be able to pay our salespeople properly. Frankly, we're just better off selling another product. So you've got to toe that line between fairness and competitiveness.
Yeah, it's a thin line always.
And why sort of go-to-market and program design is so critical, and why, my advice to anyone building a channel: invest heavily in your partner programs teams and invest heavily in your partner programs tools, because it doesn't matter how good your product is, you can absolutely kill a channel just with bad program design.
Yeah, it's again with the breaking trust, I think. I think if we look at the channel, like it's always been very synonymous, of course, with revenue. And we've been talking a lot recently about lead and lag measures. And I think the lag measure is very clearly, that's always revenue. That's the North Star that all channel teams are working on. But I think where deal registration plays a very crucial part is getting more insight into the lead measure. So what is leading to that revenue eventually? So how many deal registers do you have? What is the deal velocity? So how quickly is it moving through your pipeline? What is the close won rate? So you actually get more and more insight. So you are much better to forecast where your pipeline and where your revenue is heading. What do you think there? Like, why is that so crucial?
Yeah, it's so crucial. And actually, one other statistic that I know vendors look at and pay attention to is deal reg value versus close value, because those numbers are never perfectly aligned. And what you'll sometimes find is partners significantly overestimate the value of the closure, and then suddenly that can screw your forecast, right? Because you're going, hang on, we've got $1 million in forecast. Well, actually, if you've got a 30% drop from that, suddenly you're actually only forecasting 70%. So what you need to see is, actually these deals are being upsold through the sales cycle, or they're not, or they're being undercut. How do we manage that? Being able to predict what your revenue performance looks like is critical for so many reasons. One, it allows you to understand where to focus, right? What key deals are in pipe that we might need to help. But two, well, if you're at 300% of forecast on deal reg, well, you're probably in a really good position. Maybe that's where you need to double down, add resource, because suddenly, there's going to be so many deals you can't handle them properly. That's a great position to be in. But so that's so critical, because what you don't want to happen is, so suddenly you've got all those deals and they're not being managed effectively, and then your conversion percentage plummets because you've not got the level of support through the process that you really need. So that sort of predictability is critical for both vendors and partners.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the reason why we talk so often about lead measures, because I like the way like you're extracting this. That's impossible if you don't have that deal registration. Like your partners are working on their own deals in their own CRM. So you need a place where you can actually track and manage the deals with your partners together as well. Because otherwise it's simply impossible. You will never know what the opportunity value was at the start when the deal was registered or at close date. Or you won't know when it was created and when it was closed, like what the pipeline velocity is. And that's crucial information when you're optimizing your partner program and your sales process together with partners.
It's actually one of the bugbears I hear all the time from SaaS brands, which is people deal reg for the initial deal, but there's no deal reg process implemented for the renewal. And suddenly deals that they were expecting to come in drop out. And they're like, hang on, how has this happened? And that's exactly the limiting factor. If you don't have the predictable visibility, obviously the benefit of the channel is we don't have to control everything because the channel is doing it on our behalf, generates massive scale. Well, that's brilliant when it's working in your favor because you don't have to touch it and it works and it grows. But when it's not working in your favor, you might get to the end of the quarter and go, we were expecting our hockey stick to kick in and it didn't. Well, if you don't have deal reg, you won't know until the end of quarter. And then you're in a really, really bad place. And so tracking lead measures that ultimately build to lag measures. And once you do this over a period of quarters and years, you start to get very, very dialed in on average conversion time, average deal velocity, average conversion percentage. And then you're able to be very, very clinical outside of maybe some very lumpy deals around what your sort of BAU performance looks like.
Yeah, you're touching on something very interesting there with the renewals, I think, because that's a whole different game, of course, since that entered with SaaS and subscriptions. And that's where deal registration can play a crucial part as well, that as soon as the deal is closed, the partner tells you what the contract duration is. You can automate when it needs to create a new deal already or a new opportunity for the renewal. And that's where you need to get your business back again every year, so to say. It's a crucial part to have that motion together with your partners as well.
Yeah, and it's something when I speak to SaaS brands, it's something I speak to them a lot about, which is lots of hardware vendors will have services contracts, right, for maintenance of the product, and renewals teams are built through the channel to help manage and drive those forward. But it's actually something that SaaS brands miss a lot, which is, have the partners got a renewals team, and are you driving the action and the cadence into that renewals team 180 days, 90 days ahead of contract renewal to ensure that it comes in? Because if you don't do that, you will find that your direct business has a better renewal rate than your channel business, and that looks really, really bad on paper. A lot of the valuations driven around SaaS businesses are around lifetime contract value. And if you don't have that built and those renewal processes in place and driven through your partner organization, you're going to really struggle. So don't just look at deal reg for net new opportunities. Look at deal reg in respect of a leading measure to the renewal, because it's critical you get those over the line.
Yeah, then you really get into the recurring revenue motion of both getting new business in, but also making sure your renewals and expansion are continuously running.
And it's a win-win, right? The partner wants the renewal because they get paid on the renewal. The vendor wants the renewal so that because they also get paid on the renewal. You've just got to make sure that you've got a process threaded through the channel to ensure it's top of priority. I find so often sales leaders are so focused on net new pipe, which is great because that's how you grow. But if you've got a leaky bucket, you're actually in a really, really challenging position. It's no good adding 100K of revenue, dropping out 70K of revenue. It's like, oh, we're almost at the start again. Instead, what you need to make sure is that you're not just attacking the renewal for the retention, but also for the upsell, right? That's really where you want to get it and drive in a new sales cycle, which would require a new deal registration, because you're going to be able to upsell that contract, add value.
Yeah, and that's when you get into a whole different ballgame when you are in a subscription business.
Yeah, in my mind, some of my favorite salespeople are customer success people, but hyper aggressive customer success people, right? Really commercially focused on driving upsell, not just retention. They sort of see retention as minimum requirements. They want to get aggressive into those accounts and grow them. And you do that through a very, very proactive sales cycle.
Yeah, I think what I also find very interesting when I think about deal registration, especially when you work in a reseller or an MSP environment, the customer relationship is owned by the partner in such a case. And deal registration can also really help you to get a lot more insight into who your ICP is, whether it's through the channel or your ICP in general. And that can really help you to iterate on your partner program as well, because otherwise you would never know who the end user of your product is. So that's why it's crucial to get those deal registrations in as well, so you can use those learnings to improve your partner program.
Yeah, here's a great example. And I've worked with some brilliant data guys at Zoom, and they really had this down as a process, and it really gave me some insights into very strong program design, which is one of the things that you may be able to look at is we've got a higher conversion percentage for SME deals. Well, that's an interesting thing because SME might only represent 20% of your business, your stack. And so it might not be a focus if you're just looking at revenue. But if suddenly you look, oh, hang on a second, our conversion percentage is 85, 90% in the SME, even though it represents a small part of our total business, because that conversion ratio is so high, that's actually where we need to double down. Because if we doubled the amount of pipeline, we are going to see an outweighed return versus mid-market and enterprise. And you can only do that level of measurement if you're tracking lead and lag and not just measuring revenue.
Yeah, that's a very interesting way indeed. And then you have like variables like company size, like SME, mid-market enterprise, but also verticals, education, retail, healthcare, etc. The more you know about your end user, the better you can create your partner program as well and serve your partners in the best way.
And not just end user, but deal cycle, right? So if we take a vertical example, we might go, oh, wow, it's great. We've got lots of healthcare businesses, but our sales cycle on that, the deal reg to close time is 9 months. Oh, but for finance, it's only 4 months. Does that mean we need to align more of a sales strategy to get more finance opportunities in? Because actually our closure rate is higher and faster. Deal velocity is obviously critical to continuing to grow very quickly. And you only get that if you understand when the opportunity was created, what the value is, and when it closes, what the value is. And then you can start to do that sort of proportional analysis that's going to really help you understand which horse to bet on.
Yeah, the question I get a lot from channel teams is that what they see a lot is that the deal registration is only created very shortly before the deal actually closes. Well, in terms of forecasting, it's very important that you know it as early as possible in the deal cycle and not just in terms of forecasting, but also in terms of closed won rate, etc. What are ways to extend that period between deal registration and actual closed won date?
Sure. So the first place I would always start is education, because some partners aren't aware that the reason that they need to put a deal registration is better forecasting, deal support, whatever it is. And so they just put the deal reg in because they think they're being helpful when they know the deal is closing. And so that's very often what will happen. Deal reg will go in, purchase order will arrive 2 days later, because they're waiting until they've got the purchase order from the partner or from the end user before they put the deal reg in. That doesn't make sense. So you need to educate the partners as to why deal reg helps the vendor get a view on predictability, and that you're not expecting 100% of deal regs to close, which is often what I hear from partners. Oh, but now we've got 100% closure rate. We didn't want to waste your time. You need to explain to them that they're expecting a dropout, and visibility is very helpful. The second way is incentives, right? Which is, that's your carrot. Yep, we're going to give you supported pricing, but that maybe only counts 45 days before the purchase order lands. And so you can start to instill that behavior to bring forward the visibility on deal reg.
Yeah, maybe there you can also really tier that discounted pricing, for example. So the longer time in front of a closed won deal they brought it in, the better their preference pricing actually becomes.
Yeah, I know certain vendors will have a ratio. So basically, if the deal is over a certain size, they expect to see the deal reg in sooner, because the deal cycle is obviously longer. If you're selling $3 million worth of networking, that's not a 2-week deal cycle. That's 6 months, right? So their expectation is, well, we need to see that deal reg in 4 months ahead of time, or you do not get the supported pricing, because they know that you need that level of time to close the deal. And so they're encouraging good behavior by telling the partner, get it in as quickly as you can. And that brings us on to sort of the third point, which is protection, right? You've got to educate your partners. It's a first come, first serve. And that's doubly true if you have a direct and a partner organization, because that's where I see this confusion crop up the most, which is the end user may be talking to the partner and the vendor separately. And so a deal reg protects you not just against other partners, but against the vendor itself. And so you've got to educate the partners that pricing protection isn't just free margin, it's to stop competitive elements entering the deal. And so obviously, if it's a first come, first serve, you need to get that in as quickly as possible to protect any competition.
Yeah, and I think that last point indeed is very much where you're bringing the partner attribution into your CRM as well. And that's a crucial thing when you also have a direct sales team. And actually one of the points that your partners will love the most as an argument to get it in early, the sooner they do this, the more they are protected specifically against the direct sales teams.
So what I see very often in SaaS businesses especially is that the end user sales team is both direct and channel support. And so what's funny is those people can be your competition and your allies. But the second you put the deal reg in, they're on your side and they're going to help you close that deal. And so my advice to partners always is put too many deal regs in. You're never going to get pushback from a vendor for saying, oh my God, he's put too many deal regs in. It will affect your conversion percentage, but they'll factor that into their data analysis. But it allows you to get the level of vendor support that you need. And don't forget, it doesn't matter how good a salesperson you are. If you're selling multiple products and the vendor's job is just to sell their product, they should be better than you because it's all they sell. They do it day to day. They're aware of latest features and updates. And so you want their help, and deal reg is the way to make that happen.
Yeah, and I think indeed, if we really get back into that, what's in it for the partner again, that support of that end user team is crucial there. But you can also really start building cases there. So if you see, for example, that the earlier deals get into your pipeline, the higher the close won rate eventually. That's especially the type of things that your partners want to hear, of course, because they are in it to win that deal and they want to grow their business with revenue. And if you can actually prove to them and show them by educating them in the right way that the sooner they do this, the more help they will get, the higher close won rate, the better rebate, etc. Then, and really tie that into your partner program. That's when you can create a significant increase in terms of your deal registrations in general, but also to get them in way earlier.
Yeah, exactly. And look, sales leadership within the partner level are going to absolutely go ballistic if you find out you didn't get a deal reg in time because you weren't doing your admin. and then now the deal's being won by another partner, even though you've done the due diligence, right? That's what you've got to educate your partners. That's why it always starts with education, because partners want to win. And as long as you can build the program around helping them win more effectively, yes, they're going to do the admin. It's the same reason you bully salespeople into doing the admin in HubSpot or Salesforce on their own CRM, because they know it helps drive closure effectively.
Yeah, I think indeed from that perspective, it's very similar to getting your internal sales team to use the CRM. At first, nobody likes it and everybody's really like, why are we doing this? But then as soon as you start noticing that it helps you to be successful, then the game changes.
Yeah, and the last one that I would talk about, because it was particularly prevalent in COVID, was stock allocation, right? So one of the things that I think a lot of partners might not realize is vendors and distributors are built to hold the minimum amount of stock possible, because it helps them be more profitable, right? If a vendor's building 4 times more stock than they need, they've got to warehouse it, they've got to insurance it. It's complicated to manage. Same for distributors. And so they try and run as little stock as possible while driving the channel forward. If you have a big deal and you don't put a deal reg in with an expected close date, it doesn't flag to someone within the vendor that stock is needed, and then they won't do effective resource allocation. That happened massively, obviously, with supply chain issues through COVID. And I just saw deals not being fulfilled. Key big deals for important customers, because someone else had got a deal reg in. They'd allocated the stock to that order, and tough, that's all they had.
Yeah, I agree. I think I heard so many stories during COVID where they had back orders for like 9 months or so, and they just couldn't deliver, and it was almost impossible.
Yeah, I mean, look, we saw it not just in the channel, right? Car sales had exactly this problem. If you didn't have an idea on expected order flow, you can't assign the stock to it, because some of it's made to order. And for a lot of the channel, especially for large deals, they are made to order. Now, you want to get ahead of that, especially if it's a key end user. But some partners were losing deals to other partners because other partners had stock. And then you look like a right idiot, because you go, well, there's no stock available in the UK or in the Netherlands. And you go, well, I've just spoken to another partner and they have the stock. And it's because they've been managing deal reg and pipeline more effectively than you that can really tarnish your reputation. So my advice to partners is get your deal regs in early, drive support from the vendor, get stock allocation if you need it, and protect yourself against all your competition, including the vendor's direct salespeople.
Yeah, and maybe for that stock allocation, just so I completely understand it, is like a first come, first serve. The earlier you get your deal registration in, and you can give the vendor a strong estimate of when the deal is expected to close, the higher the possibility that you will get the stock at the right moment.
Exactly that, because sometimes what will happen, especially if the partner's not used to dealing with that vendor, they'll just send a purchase order to the distributor with no visibility. Then what happens, the distributor goes, well, we don't have the stock. And then they go, okay, well, what do we do now? And you go, well, it's in China, so it's going to take 6 weeks to get here. And if the end user needs that urgently, well, then you're screwed. Whereas if you told them 7 weeks ago, hey, by the way, this order's coming in 2nd week of January, I'm sure of it, here's the deal reg, I know it's happening, then they can at least take a hedged bet to bring the stock in. And that's what distributors and vendors spend all their time doing. They know that it's never going to be 100% conversion, but the partner's job is not to deliver 100% conversion. The partner's job is to give visibility on potential deals, and then some tolerance will fall out always. But that's the distributor and the vendor's job, to manage that across hundreds of partners.
Yeah, I like this one. I think especially for our hardware vendor listeners, where indeed that stock perspective is crucial, because if there's one thing a partner never wants, it's losing a deal. If you educate them on why this is also such a crucial part of making sure that when they sell it, they can actually implement and deliver, that's a big game changer, I think, as well within deal registration.
Yeah, and I've even seen pricing support not matter in that instance, right? And this happened so much in COVID, where people had pricing support in place, they'd had deal regs, but the end user was like, well, I don't care if I have to pay 10% more. Our team need X, or we need to hit a delivery date, so we're just going to go to your partner down the road. And then that's just horrendous for business, can burn reputations, screws up your own internal pipeline. So just having that predictability and forecast, so important for the partner, so important for the vendor.
I think that's a great way to summarize this episode. For today, we've spoken about deal registration a lot, and why it's so important for you as a vendor to get more predictability and to increase your forecast there, but also learn a lot about your sales cycle and about your ICP. but also very important, why is it important for the partner? And some very practical tips on how you actually bring your deal registrations forward a lot more and increase the number of deal registrations. I really hope you liked today's episode. I'm looking forward to see you next week. And if you liked it, please share it with a colleague or send Alex or me a DM on LinkedIn. We're very active there. And see you next week.